You ever look at one of those massive government programs or a huge charity and just get this feeling that something is, well, fundamentally broken? You see all the money pouring in, all the good intentions, but the problem never actually seems to get better? Well, let's dive into that feeling, because it turns out it has a name. It points to this massive hidden error baked right into the logic of our most important institutions.
I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? It's a paradox. You've got brilliant, truly compassionate people dedicating their lives to solving these huge problems. And yet, the problems stick around. Sometimes they even get worse. So what gives? Are they all just bad at their jobs? Well, according to the source material we're looking at, the real answer is way more interesting and, honestly, a lot more disturbing. And this table just lays out the conflict perfectly. On the left, you have the stated goal. What we all want. We want to solve urgent problems. But the actual result? Those problems somehow persist and get worse. The goal is to foster innovation, but what we get is just more bureaucracy. We say we want to help people, and instead we accidentally create entire industries that literally depend on their suffering to exist. So this brings us to what the author calls the feel-good failure paradox. And let's be clear, this is not some kind of grand conspiracy theory with people twisting their mustaches in a back room. No, it's a fundamental error in logic that feels deeply moral and, really satisfying to everyone involved, even as it completely fails to get real-world results. And this quote from the author, Paul Leonard, just nails it. The people inside these systems, they're well-meaning. They genuinely believe they are doing good work. The problem is, the system rewards them for the feeling of helping, not the actual act of solving the problem. And that right there is the key to why this whole thing is so hard to change. Okay, so how does a paradox this huge just hide in plain sight? Well, the first clue is in the language. The system creates its own kind of dialect. You could call it bureaucraties. And the whole trick is that the words being used, they don't mean what you think they mean. They're being used to disguise failure and create this false reality of progress. This quote from the source is just so powerful. It's about this idea of false friends. Words that sound familiar but mean something totally different. So you think you're having a conversation about, say, solving homelessness, but because you're using their language, what you're really doing is just agreeing to their version of reality, or the problem is never really solved. So let's look at some examples. Let's start with the word impact. When you hear a charity talk about their impact, you're probably thinking about, lives actually saved or poverty being reduced. But in bureaucraties, impact can just mean they got some good press, spent all their money, and wrote a really long report about it. The activity itself gets confused with the achievement. And how about value? For most of us, value is the actual benefit you get from something. But inside this system, value is often just budgetary throughput. The most important question becomes, did we spend the money? Did it move from one spreadsheet to another? If the answer is yes, then the program created value. It doesn't matter if it actually helped a single person. The process is the goal. And this one is absolutely devastating. Cure. We think it means the disease is gone. You're healthy. But according to the author, inside the medical industrial complex, a cure is simply a product that can make its way through the existing maze of regulations and finance. It doesn't mean you're healthy. It just means the system approved a treatment. The definition serves the system, not the patient. So this hidden logic error, this system that runs on good intentions but produces failure, it actually has a name. It was originally coined by the economist Friedrich Hayek, but you could argue its modern meaning is even more insidious. The fatal conceit. It's basically the arrogant belief that a few smart people can centrally plan and manage a complex system based on their intentions, instead of being held accountable for real-world, measurable outcomes. So let's break that down. It's a fatal error in logic because the system, instead of correcting the mistake, actually rewards it. It celebrates the process, the spending, the meetings, the reports, instead of the outcome, and by doing that, it guarantees its own survival, often at a tremendous human cost. All right, I know this might all sound a bit abstract, so let's look at how this fatal conceit actually plays out in the real world with a couple of case studies pulled from our source material. First up, Germany's incredibly ambitious green energy transition, the Energiewende. It was praised all over the world as the gold standard, a model for everyone else. The intention couldn't have been more noble: switch to renewables and fight climate change. So how much did they spend?
over $1.2 trillion. Now, if you're thinking in bureaucracy, where spending equals value, this should have been one of the greatest success stories in history. But what were the actual results on the ground? Well, the real-world outcomes were, frankly, a disaster. Energy prices for regular people doubled, German industry became less competitive, and get this, their carbon emissions actually increased because the grid became so fragile they had to start importing power from coal plants just to keep the lights on. But hey, by the system's own metrics, dollars spent, turbines built, it was a huge success. People got promoted. That is a perfect, tragic example of the fatal conceit. Now let's shift to another area, the cancer charity complex. Billions and billions of dollars are raised every single year through these powerful emotional appeals to fight cancer. We do the charity walks, we donate, we feel like we're part of the solution. The intention is completely pure. But the author argues that this system is basically incapable of producing a true cure, the actual absence of disease. And why is that? Because its very structure defines cure in a way that protects its own business model. Only expensive, patentable drugs are considered. The system reinvests in managing the problem, not solving it. And tragically, this means the system actually has less of an incentive to find a cure than it does to maintain the state of suffering. So you have to ask, why does this keep happening? If the failures are so obvious, why do these systems not only stick around, but actually get bigger? The author puts forward this really powerful idea. We have created a suffering as a service economy. And this explains the whole self-reinforcing loop beautifully. Number one, it feels good to be a part of it. Donating your money or working in these fields gives you a real sense of moral purpose. Two, it looks good on paper. Success is just measured by how many dollars were spent, not how many problems were solved. And three, it pays really well. Entire careers and whole industries are built around managing problems that are never, ever supposed to be solved. So where do we go from here? The author argues that trying to fight this system head-on is a losing battle. The key isn't to tear it all down, but to completely change its reward loop. We have to rewrite the incentives from the ground up. And this is the critical point. We have to take back our language. We have to start demanding new definitions. Success has to mean real human lives got better, period. Impact needs to be something you can actually measure and even prove wrong. And value has to mean more than just moving money from one column to another. And the author's vision for what this could look like is actually pretty fascinating. Just imagine a world with radical transparency, all powered by technology. Think smart contracts that show you exactly where your donation went and what it accomplished. Public dashboards that score programs based on real outcomes, not just press releases. Imagine a system where we, the public, reward actual results, not just the feel-good stories. And all of this leaves us with one final, powerful question we have to ask ourselves. When we give our money, our time, or our vote, are we actually funding solutions, or are we just paying for the appearance of trying? Are we funding the aesthetics of effort? And in doing so, are we becoming a part of the fatal conceit? The choice of what we demand and what we reward is ultimately up to us.